we have representatives from the government and the opposition. Dear colleagues, before going to our witness, who will join us by video conference, I wanted to take a moment, given the time we've lost and also uncertainty with regards to this afternoon's schedule and the possibility that there might be other votes and there are procedural issues going on in the House.
We still do have time in the remaining meetings to accommodate Mr. Amos, and given the uncertainty, and he is a member of Parliament, so he is around these parts more often than not, it's easier to reaccommodate him. So we would hear from the witness and then do questioning, and then depending how time is going, we can move on from there and put Mr. Amos' testimony to another day. Alors, je regarde le comité, voir s'il y a des...
So I'm looking to the committee to see if there are any thoughts. What do you think about this? Mr. Graham, I don't know if there will be anyone else on the other side. Mr. Graham? I think that we should do as much work as we can and give William the time to do his opening statement, in as much as there is no vote. That's how I would see things. We would proceed. We'd give 45 minutes, an hour, to Mr. Johnson, and then we'd allow Mr. Amos to make his opening statements. This is a possibility, but the issue and what concerns me is that we won't have the opportunity to ask questions on the motion if it's 5:30, if the bells are starting to ring, if there's a procedural issue. This is my concern. The clerk is telling me that there would be little impact on the schedule for the following weeks. Honestly, my personal opinion, I know that I'm replacing Mr. McKay, so I don't want to make any editorial statement, but I think that the study that's being asked for with Mr. Amos's motion, with the days to come, we risk to not advance in a substantive fashion. So I'm open to suggestions. Mr. Paulus? I agree with you, Mr. Chair. We should, the gentleman from PayPal has been waiting for an hour. We should give him the opportunity to speak, and we'll ask questions. And when he can end, we can see William another day. Do you have any huge objections? I don't really see why it would be necessary. Well, we have a motion that is asking for us to do this study, and I want it to be dealt with. I don't want it to drag on for months because we lost today. That's why I wanted the opening statements. That way it started. Well, once again, the clerk informs me that for calendar considerations, there will be no problem. And so if that can reassure you, with regards to our ability to hear Mr. Amos, there will be no problem. Let me double check. I don't see why we couldn't hear him at another time. I agree with Mr. Paulus. We've already made our witness wait long enough. So we will proceed. And with this uncertainty, yes, we have an hour and 15 minutes, but if we do 45 minutes and then Mr. Amos arrives, if we don't have enough time, if the bells start to ring, I prefer not to do that, given that it's rare that we have a witness that is very easy to reschedule, such as an MP. Well, let's start.
Now move to our witness, and I want to thank Mr. Johnson for his patience. The procedural wrangling that goes on in this place does have that impact sometimes, but so joining us by video conference, we have Brian Johnson, who is Senior Director for Information Security at PayPal. And you have 10 minutes, Mr. Johnson, for your opening statement, and we'll take questions from the members, and we thank you for taking the time this afternoon.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. Again, my name is Brian Johnson, and I do serve as the Senior Director of Information Security at PayPal. I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to speak with you today and for making the time in your busy schedule. I suspect you all know a bit about PayPal, generally speaking, but allow me to add a bit of detail. Founded in 1998, PayPal is a leading technology platform company that enables digital and mobile payments on behalf of more than 277 million consumers and merchants in more than 200 markets worldwide. We offer online and mobile merchant acquiring and money transfer services, and PayPal is the most popular digital wallet in Canada. Based in San Jose, California, our Canadian headquarters is in Toronto with offices in Vancouver, and PayPal Canada was incorporated in 2006. We have more than 7.1 million customers, including more than 250,000 small business customers in Canada. Fueled by a fundamental belief that having access to financial services creates opportunity, PayPal is committed to democratizing financial services and empowering people and businesses to join and thrive in the global economy. Our open digital payments platform gives PayPal's 277 million active account holders the confidence to connect and transact in new and in powerful ways, whether they're online or on a mobile device. Through a combination of technological innovation and strategic partnerships, PayPal creates better ways to manage and move money and offers choice and flexibility when sending payments, paying, or getting paid. We believe that now is the time to reimagine money and to democratize financial services so that managing and moving money is right for all citizens, not just the affluent. We believe that every person has the right to participate fully in the global economy. We have an obligation to empower people to exercise this right and improve their financial health. As a fintech pioneer and an established leader, we believe in providing simple, affordable, secure, and reliable financial services and digital payments that enable the hopes, dreams, and ambitions of millions of people around the world. We have a fundamental commitment to put our customers at the center of everything that we do. Securing our customers and their data is central to our mission. For financial companies, data security is the main pillar. Through strong partnerships, strategic investments, and a tireless commitment to protect consumers, PayPal has resolved to be an industry leader in cybersecurity capabilities and help make the internet safer. We have in our favor more than 20 years of experience in processing electronic transactions safely. PayPal is one of the most sophisticated fraud prevention engines in the world, which gets smarter with every transaction that goes through our system. With our advanced fraud monitoring technology, we detect and prevent attacks before they happen. Security is in our DNA, and it's at the epicenter of all that we do at PayPal. We are the #1 trusted brand of e-commerce and mobile commerce around the world. People trust PayPal because they know that we don't share customers' financial information with merchants, retailers, or online sellers. Our robust security standards ensure that every part of transactions are safe and secure. At PayPal, we believe we have a responsibility to help protect our users against harm, and privacy has always been one of our main concerns. Our customers trust us with their data, and we take that trust very seriously. We only collect data that's necessary to fulfill services that a customer requests, improve product experiences, and deliver relevant PayPal advertisements and prevent fraud. We never sell or rent customer information. It's commonly held among global law enforcement agencies that cybercrime and online methods of fraud are now more common than crimes committed in the offline and physical world. As the committee is certainly aware, over the last 5 years, the RCMP alone has observed an almost 50% increase in cybercrime reports from Canadians. And I applaud the committee for aggressive action and for your support of your national cybersecurity strategy. It's including significant funding for investments in cybersecurity as part of your commitment to safety and security. Building an innovative and adaptive cyber ecosystem is a crucial step in being able to quickly scale and combat threats that are emerging to critical infrastructure, government, business, and individuals' digital information. To conclude, I'd like to emphasize PayPal's commitment to cybersecurity and our willingness to work together with the Canadian government and industry. Thank you again for the invitation to discuss these very relevant topics and to represent PayPal's strong position in support of consumer data protection and privacy. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. And we will indeed proceed to our question period. And we will begin with Ms. Zahota, please, for 7 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for being here today. My first question is, are there any differences in how you operate in Canada versus the U.S., or are you mainly based out of the U.S. and that's where all the information ends up when Canadians are using your device or your app or the service?
Information by PayPal customers are stored within the U.S. data centers and localized data housing. So localization of data of Canadian customers is also contained within the U.S. hosted facilities.
So then to clarify, there's no difference in how you operate when it comes to Canadian customers versus the American customers, right?
Other than localization for currency or for other preferences that are localized, the data storage and information is stored the same as U.S.-based customers is.
And I'm very glad to hear that, because I would figure after operating for 2 decades, more than other competitors in this realm have existed for, you must have a lot of data stored up. And it is good to hear that you don't sell the data that you have received. So thank you for providing us with that information. However, I have seen that there's been several articles in just this recent month about PayPal. One's about paying hackers to, I would assume, what are like white hat hackers to try to protect the security of your system. If I can hear a little bit more about that. And how that's been working. Have you been doing that for a long period? Is this a recent trend that you're paying hackers to hack your system? What advantages are you getting out of that?
Excellent question, Ms. Sahota. So our program is called Bug Bounty, and it's an industry-wide accepted method of using contracted support, basically using the industry of white hat hackers through a managed program. They're vetted, so they're not allowed to just go rogue or attack systems without request and without knowledge. But researchers, they're professionally considered security researchers across industry. Many of them are professionals in other areas and use freelance time or side jobs at times to provide what's called bug bounty ethical hacking. And it helps us to expose any concerns or vulnerabilities in systems that are not caught with internal tools, and to instead catch those through bug bounty programs, which again are commonly used by many companies for security researcher community to collaborate with us on those vulnerabilities.
So do you have contracts with these hackers?
We contract with a group called HackerOne that provides the vetting process with them. And then those, through responsible disclosures, those vulnerabilities are reported to us to fix them before they're disclosed publicly, and so that we can resolve any of those vulnerabilities that they find.
And if an issue was to occur where somebody was to breach the system or someone's privacy, then where would the liability lie? Would it lie with PayPal?
If there's system breach, then that's an unauthorized activity, and it would be treated as malicious and illegitimate access, as with any malintended attacker. We don't have bug bounty researchers perform attacks or breaches, and as part of the program policy, they're not allowed to access customer data, nor to make any manipulation or changes of information. They're allowed to disclose vulnerabilities that are detected in the system and report those to us through the responsible disclosure program.
PayPal also uses an app, correct, for convenience for customers? Like you can get you could get a PayPal. A mobile app, right?
Correct. We do have mobile apps.
So I have seen articles also just recently this month that of actual accounts of people being defrauded up to $9,000 or so being taken out of their bank account, and it has been done because of the I guess what I would say is the app being able to be hacked, and as a result, the vulnerability of the app is allowing access into people's bank accounts directly. We heard from credit card companies that the information is never shared directly. Your bank information does not directly go to the credit card company, but it seems in this case is the bank information directly being shared with PayPal, and then if there's a vulnerability there, the hacker can access all that information. How are you protecting against that?
So media reports are not always accurate. Just to be technically accurate, the access of information within the PayPal account would only be through an authorized account holder or through their loss of credentials and device. So if there's the loss of credentials by a consumer, let's say they have malware on their computer and their login credentials are stolen or lost through that, the access of their account through a malicious attempt would be either caught by our fraud platform or our risk systems to detect that. If it's not caught by some vulnerability, the only access into the PayPal account would be to PayPal balance, but not directly into the consumer's bank information. the bank information is stored in our system and not made visible even after entered into the system by the consumer. So the only method they would have is of trying to extract data by using the PayPal system to process transactions. So they might try to attempt fraud, but they wouldn't be able to get their bank account information through the platform.
Interesting. The article warned for people to check their bank accounts regularly and look for PayPal transactions that may not have been authorized. When this occurs, how does the person recover? Do they recover from their bank, or are they able to recover from PayPal? What happens?
We have buyer protection so that if there are malicious or unintended transactions on a consumer account, we actually provide buyer liability and buyer protection for those fraudulent transactions and protect the consumer in that case. Again, I want to reiterate, though, that a malicious account access into a PayPal account is unlike a malicious access into any account. If the online fraud occurs, we cover liability for the buyer or for the consumer in that case. And our seller protection has other coverages unique to seller and merchants. But the access of a PayPal account does not mean that the malicious actor has access to the bank account directly necessarily. They don't have access to credentials nor to the bank account information, only the linkage that we provide for the bank account as a funding instrument into the PayPal account.
Okay, I guess I'll make a final comment. Do I have like 20 seconds?
10 seconds.
Okay. I used to be a user of PayPal many years ago, but I stopped using after a while when I continued to get fraudulent emails telling me about certain transactions that were made. So just a final comment that it can lead to being very confusing for the user, and therefore I just steered away from it because I found that there was just too many fake emails I was receiving from PayPal. Fraudulent users.
Unfortunately, we're gonna have to leave it there. On va passer à Monsieur Paulus pour 7 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Dubé. I'm going to ask my questions in French. Do you hear the interpretation? Do you hear the English? Okay. First question. You say that PayPal is an organization that has existed since 1998. You've been there since the early stages of the internet. Are you able to follow the evolution, the progression? We know that cybersecurity programs came and evolved with the internet. So is PayPal able to follow the same evolution and to adjust to threats?
What's up?
Investments in emerging.
Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just want to restart your answer, and we won't penalize Mr. Potus for the time. We couldn't hear you on this end. Go ahead, please.
Sure. So we do, in fact, many of our staff in our information security organization are members of industry alliances that are helping to make the internet more secure. We're absolutely in the research and development stages of many investments. Email phishing and anti-phishing working group is another area, as Mrs. Soda mentioned as well, that the investments we make in email security, internet security, and browser security are at the forefront of our investments.
You mentioned that people trusted PayPal. So what are you doing to ensure this trust? How do you make sure that people can have full trust in your business?
As I mentioned with our buyer protection programs, we provide liability coverage for any fraudulent activities that might happen on a consumer account. We also invest heavily into cybersecurity initiatives and our fraud risk platforms that prevent fraud. We actually have industry-leading metrics on how low our fraud numbers are, in the sense that we protect and prevent from a significant amount of fraud and protect merchants and consumers on our platform at an excellent rate that we're very proud of.
Excellent. We heard witnesses during our study. We met with different banks, the Toronto Dominion Bank, and they mentioned that they had to go through cyber attacks coming from different countries. Could you talk about the different foreign countries that are trying to hack into PayPal?
Interestingly, foreign countries, if you mention nation state, are not information that I'm at liberty to share, but related to private attackers or individuals that are online fraudsters that would attempt to attack websites happen on a regular basis and are not centralized to any particular geographic region. There is, of course, high distribution of cyber attacks that are often difficult to trace their origin or their attribution to the country of origin, because a lot of countries participate in their infrastructure allowed to be hacked. As an example, attackers may originate from one country and use internet services from another country to direct their attacks. So it's a multi-layered economy that criminals use, and there's multiple parties usually involved from different regions in each attack.
Je comprends
I understand the nuance between the origin of individuals coming from foreign countries, but my question is more the country itself, the state itself. Any particular countries attacking PayPal?
Not in particular. We have no singular concentration of countries that attack us as a company uniquely.
OK. Parfait. Si on parle.
Now, you are in the U.S., and the company is dealing in many different countries throughout the world. Each of these countries have different regulations. For example, we're looking here from a Canadian perspective. Are Canadian laws and Canadian regulations, do they have an impact on PayPal operations? Are our laws too restrictive, not restrictive enough with regards to data protection, private data protection?
Question. The data protection and data privacy implications that Canada is proposing and has outlined as a framework are an excellent support for, I think, industry and businesses globally. To answer the first part of your question about operating globally, we do have staff in many of our regions that have increased regulations and local presence in many countries, including Europe, with support for GDPR, and in APAC and in regions in Singapore, where we have support for our business in the APAC region. So we do have localized staff and support for each of those regions, as well as other areas in the world that support local regulations. We have a global workforce that encourages the participation with local legislators and regulators, and we work closely with examiners and regulators when there are data protection and data privacy laws to ensure that we not only support and accommodate those, but help to align with regulations that are evolving and help inform practical applications of those in a context that's suitable for a global economy.
À votre idée, est-ce que.
In your opinion, should Canada bring forth certain improvements? You said that we had strong laws, but in your opinion, do you have any recommendations for us from a legislative point of view?
I believe that sorry, I got an echo there. Can you hear me okay? So the announcement of the new digital charter, by the way, PayPal applauds Minister Baines and the Government of Canada for taking leadership on that important topic of data protection. We believe that responsibility does help us to protect users against harm and support privacy laws. It's a great first step. It drives some principles. I believe the 10th principle, or the last principle in that, was to provide accountability and enforcement. More detail around that would be helpful. But certainly the guidelines and following, as Canada has not been the first mover of data privacy law, I think that's actually gone and worked to your advantage because you've been able to learn from other regions and regulators on the right balance of privacy law. But being specific with companies in respect to the digital privacy and regulations that you're encouraging, will be a tough balance between the framework that you've provided and those guiding principles that help direct good behavior and strong accountability, as well as work with industry and private partnerships that'll help to build strong legislation that you can support in years to come.
Merci beaucoup. On va passer maintenant à M.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to go to Mr. Picard, 7 minutes. Mr. Chair, normally you would have 7 minutes as well. In these circumstances, I would allocate 7 minutes to the chair. No, no, go ahead. But that's quite generous of you, but go ahead.
To look at your operation from a money laundering standpoint. When I buy credit or I put money in my account, first naive question, I guess, where does my money go?
Where does your money go in a PayPal balance?
Yeah.
PayPal balances are backed by a number of U.S. banks, so we support depositing and safe investment and deposit of the account money. If you're looking at credit, or you said the first item was if you use credit, was that a kind of a supporting comment, or what was the line there before I answer the?
If so, when I buy a number of credit and I put some money in my account for further purchases,
right.
My money then ends up in a bank supporting your transaction. Do you have, let's say I have $100 of whatever unit, or maybe just dollars, to buy stuff. Do you have a trace of the origin of this transaction, where it comes from? Credit card, bank account, stuff like that.
Yes, I'm sorry. I understand your question now, Mr. Picard. Yes, the origin of the money, and from an AML perspective, we have an anti-money laundering department and a strong division and investment in detecting money laundering activities. So we treat those activities very seriously by tracing money trail from the point of origin, funding source, the original deposit method, and we support law enforcement efforts in fighting any money laundering operations or fraud schemes that are detected or reported on the platform.
You're supporting any efforts during the investigation, but when you get the money from any credit card, at your level, I guess you accept the transaction as long as there are enough money at the point of origin. That means that if I have for example, prepaid credit card, and I want to buy money, put money in my balance, I put my credit card, you verify the balance, the money is there, you take it, and there's no more investigation, regardless of the origin, whether this origin is criminal or not. You cannot verify that.
We actually do validation of the data source or the money source at its origin, and a prepaid, in certain circumstances, prepaid has limits applied onto how much we will allow money to be deposited and what that money can be withdrawn within a period of time or spent within certain websites. Our risk and fraud platforms do have very granular rules that detect for certain financial instruments that are used based on the risk level. And if there is an AML or a money laundering method that we've written into our fraud patterns for that use case, like prepaid, as an example, then we place limits and certain criteria to restrict losses and to minimize risk in that case.
The highest limit I can put in my account, and do you have pattern analysis in terms of type of transactions?
We do. We perform behavioral analysis, and we have some artificial intelligence methods running in our risk platforms as well that are learning and baselining behaviors and payment patterns across the platform as well. Usually
when money is in my balance, I cannot withdraw money as is. I have to buy something. Is that the case? Or do I have exceptions where I can withdraw some money from my balance?
We do provide methods of withdrawing money in certain regions of the world, depending on where the money was sourced, of course. It can be withdrawn through different methods. We have a partnership, as an example, with Walmart that allows for cash withdrawals. With Walgreens and with local retailers, we've opened partnerships that allow for deposit and withdrawal of cash in local currency. Through our integration with the Zoom platform, we also allow for global remittance or transfer across border of different transactions and withdraw money through different methods at retailers as well. So the money can be deposited or withdrawn in cash in certain methods also.
The maximum amount of money I can put in my balance in one transaction?
I believe it depends on the risk rules. That's not my area of expertise, so I don't know the specifics, but there are limits depending on age of account, if your account has been verified with identification, if we've verified the account holder's history. There's other methods of raising that limit based on knowledge and know your customer indicators on trusting the account holder.
Do you have the obligation to declare to FinTrack in Canada if there are patterns of transaction or deposit of more than $10,000?
I'm not certain of that. I'm not in the fraud or the AML department, but I know that we do report through FinCEN and through other networks in the U.S. that I'm familiar with respect to certain criteria. I'm not familiar with our reporting through the fraud pattern notification with Canada, though. We can certainly find out.
If I put money in my own account, so therefore I can myself withdraw my own money without you knowing whether I'm the same person doing both the two transactions. Let's say I put money. Let's say I take a prepaid card, or my money is in an account in a bank that is, let's say, under suspicion, and because we do have some banks that are under suspicion. Sure. I put money in my PayPal account, and 2-3 days after that, I withdraw my money. The only information you need to know to do this transaction is whether the account has the right login and password to get in, and the same thing to get the money out. There's no possibility to verify whether it's the same person. My colleague and I may work on the same account.
We do verify device telemetry. We look for information about the device or the computer you're using based on geolocation, based on some other fraud detection patterns to try to verify the authenticity of the user on the account. And the account holder, of course, has to have the credentials to perform that payment or that transaction.
Another domain, I don't have that much time. The nature of the attacks you've been targeted. What kind of evolution have you seen throughout the years? The level of sophistication of those attacks. What can you say about that?
Generally speaking, the cyber attack footprint has become much more complex and advanced. Cyber criminals have become much more of an economy amongst themselves and have layered their tools, their data, their methods of attack in a very sophisticated way and a very coordinated way in many cases. There are both criminals that are creating tools and criminals that are executing and renting access to those tools. Everything from distributed denial of service attacks or DDoS attacks that have become much more significant and advanced over the years. The cyber landscape and threats and emerging trends in that area have definitely become more complex and increased in scale dramatically in recent years.
Colleagues, as you can see, we have bells, so we do require unanimous consent to continue. And if we do choose to do so, we must decide also for how much longer. So I'm looking for guidance based on the amount of questions you may or may not have. Mr. Graham.
I would say we go until the bell's flashing 3 times, which just give us 5 minutes to get upstairs.
So you're proposing we go for 20 minutes?
22 more minutes, yeah. What's that? 5 minutes to go up 2 floors? It's this building.
I don't want to belabor this because the time is going. So can we agree on 2 final 5-minute rounds for each of the parties at the table right now? Is that okay? I'm good on my end, but I appreciate the generosity with the speaking time from your side. Mr. Glinsky, please, for 5 minutes.
Okay, I'd like to thank the witness for being here, Brian. And I kind of want to follow through what Mr. Picard was stating. You stated earlier in your evidence that the money that is put into the PayPal accounts goes into the United States. Is that true for all countries where you do transactions?
I'm not certain on that, Mr. Glinsky. I'll have to verify with our product team on where the money is deposited in back-end sources based on locale.
Do you know about, let's deal about Canada, the Canadian customers. Do all the funds that we do transactions with you go into the United States, or is some of it done here in Canada?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure which products have storage of data and balances in which accounts, so I can't answer that with clarity.
Is there a regulatory body in the United States that requires you to report breaches in your program, or as you mentioned to Mr. Picard earlier, that you have a program that will kick out if a transaction is made and a second transaction is withdrawn from a different locality? Is that a requirement for you, and do you report those to certain security agencies within the United States or Canada?
We have a number of notifications, obligations to notify, and notification obligations based on regulator across the globe, and those are, again, regionally managed at the state level within the U.S. and at the regional level within each of the regulators. We're governed by the CSSF in Europe, which is overseeing our European banking license, the MAS, or the Monetary Authority in Singapore, and in a number of other jurisdictions where we operate money remitter and payment service provider licenses that we do in the United States and Canada. So those obligations to notify vary based on the condition, but we do notify regulators of occurrences of whether cross a threshold of notification for any data breach situation or for any money laundering operation or fraud scheme that we may detect on the platform. Those are notified through regulators as required.
Okay. Are you a member of the Canadian Cyber Threat Exchange? Do you know?
The CCTX, no, sir, we're not. We've discussed with the group, and our threat intelligence team has met with them before, but we're not currently members of the group.
Is there a reason for that, or is it just...
I believe there were other channels that kind of superseded that, so threat exchange platforms that are not specifically regional, and the CCTX actually subscribes to some of the threat feeds that we're already members of. There are a number of threat exchanges that I believe they already exchange data through, but we're not opposed to it. There just wasn't a need, as we had discussed with them, for any unique data exchange.
Okay, thank you. And following through the personal information, like I've been a member PayPal, I think, since about 2000, and I've used it quite often over the years.
Thank you for business.
How much of my personal information or other users goes through your servers, and where is that information stored? Is it stored all in the United States, or is it stored in individual countries? Really,
it's stored all in the United States. Personal information is all encrypted, and we have extremely high-level encryption technologies at all levels of our infrastructure and technology stack. And personally identifiable information is not shared. Again, we don't sell or rent that data out to anyone for marketing purposes or any other purpose. So it is housed and stays on PayPal systems in the United States in our data centers.
Okay. Have you been hacked?
Have we been hacked? The direct answer is we have not been breached. So if you're asking if we've been breached in the sense of had a customer notifiable data breach event from PayPal, no. We have had properties, as you may be aware of other adjacent companies that we've acquired over the years that have had cyber incidents reported. We've had some vulnerabilities and what would be classified as hacks noted in different products as an interface, but none of those have led to a massive breach or a data loss at the extreme level that would require any notification of breach.
Okay. You mentioned that all the... 1 minute? Okay. Quick question. You mentioned that all the data is stored in the United States. Is it stored in only one facility, or do you have a backup type system?
We have multiple backups, yes, sir. We're geographically distributed across high available data center zones so that we maintain resilience and disaster recovery capabilities across the platform.
Okay, thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Glinsky.
Thank you. Now we go to Mr. Graham. For the 5 final minutes, Mr. Graham.
Good question to start with. Do you know that the bottom of the screen says SCF Superman?
Yes, it does. That's my conference room.
Okay. I'm just wondering, because that's televised, so everyone's going to see that. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
You mentioned that. Yeah. So you mentioned that you don't trade data. Is there no interaction of any data besides transaction data between PayPal and any other company for any reason? Would that be correct?
We don't sell or rent data. There are certain fraud detection and other methods that we use, and then there are certain integrations with merchants where we require certain data types, but we don't sell our customer data, we don't rent our customer data, so the customer data footprint is not exchanged with third parties for marketing purposes unless it's opted in on the PayPal platform by our customers.
And what data besides transaction history data does PayPal collect for its own customers for its own marketing purposes?
For our own marketing purposes?
Yeah.
I'm not in...
So go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Graham, I'm not in the marketing department, so I'm not sure which data elements the marketing department uses, but we don't, again, we don't rent or sell that data outside of the platform. what we use on site of the platform and into our platform from a marketing perspective, I'm not sure. If they source other data, in other words, or do you mean data that's collected from PayPal customers?
Well, I'm just trying to get to the bottom. And Mr. Picard and I just came out of 3 days of the Grand Committee on Privacy, and we've discussed the avatars companies create and this type of thing. So it's obviously top of mind for us. And I'm trying to understand the level of information PayPal has on its users. Is it just this person has sent this much money and that's all we know about them? Or is there a great deal more information than that retained by PayPal about their users?
Well, certainly from a financial perspective, and in some of the prior questions around anti-money laundering detection and fraud prevention, there's more data that we need to collect around transaction details, usage of the platform, device information that's required to comply with local law enforcement and regulators that require that we maintain knowledge of customers. So from a KYC perspective, the transaction history and usage of certain customer computers and devices are bits of information that we use to detect fraud. Those are, again, not used for marketing purposes. We wouldn't market you because you have a certain device type that you've connected to us. If, for example, we use that for fraud prevention. And again, that's not, to my knowledge, not information that we would have in our marketing team's purview to expand on or share outside of that function.
A couple of years ago, there's a lot of ink spilled over a class action lawsuit against PayPal for accepting donations to charities that weren't members of PayPal. Do you know? And that was eventually referred to binding arbitration. Do you know the status of that suit by any chance?
I don't. I recall reading about it, but I don't recall the status of that suit.
So it wouldn't be in your purview to discuss why PayPal would accept donations for clients they don't have?
As I understood, and I'm not in this space, I'm in the cybersecurity space, but as I understood, it was kind of one of those situations where as we accept for charities, if we validate the charity is a valid company or not, or a valid charity or not, was a concern in that case. And I don't recall if it was outside of that scope because it wasn't in my purview.
Actually, can you give us, in the time I have left, a bit of a taste of the evolution of PayPal cybersecurity? Even around since '98, an awful lot has changed in that time. You have some key moments you'd like to tell us about? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so as part of PayPal was a part of eBay until just 5 years ago, and at that point, eBay had encountered some cyber events. We were part of a program that learned from those. We've emerged into a leading and the leading digital payments platform that has evolved into a global leader in the space. So we've certainly invested a lot in knowing the industry partners and working with government and working with public and law enforcement agencies to make sure that we understand the climate of each of the regions that we do business in. We've invested quite a bit in our fraud platforms to understand more about what types of criminals are trying to defraud customers. And of course, we've remained true to protecting customers' data and standing behind them with our buyer protection program and safe practices in protecting consumers in all those situations.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for having come because I know a lot of other companies in this sector haven't come to visit us. And I really appreciate PayPal having taken the time to come visit us and discuss these issues with us. But I'm finished. Thank you very much.
Certainly. Yeah,
thank you, and I will echo those sentiments, and thank you not only for your time, but also for your patience as we're a bit delayed at getting started. So thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Collègues, merci beaucoup. Étant donné
Thank you very much. Given the hour and that we do have a vote scheduled, it is there's no point in coming back. Thank you very much. I would like to say that the meeting is now adjourned. you.